little skeptical that we could keep that kind of pace. And so we were thinking, well, gosh, you know, August surely can't come in equivalent to July, and it came in at 34 and point something million. And so that's when the lays came out. And so then we thought, well, September, there's no way that September is going to come in equivalent to August, and I think September came in at $54 million. So it was only right that we brought the lays to you again. And so then October kind of dipped back down, but still exceeded budget, you know, and it was still a surplus number, even though I think it was somewhere around 3. And, but it really dipped back down, and we thought, well, that's okay. I mean, as long as we're exceeding budget, it's great. Those numbers are fantastic. So then November, if I remember correctly, came in at like 18.8 million, you know, and we thought, okay, here we go again. We're in good shape, and all that looks really good, and we're hopeful that December's going to come in at 10 to 20 million. That would be great. And today I'm announcing to you that December came in at 44.8 million. So the numbers are unbelievable. You know, I think that the best way to qualify this is just this. The biggest in history. Now that's pretty big if you think about it. The biggest in history surplus for the first 6 months of our state in a year. The biggest in history, and the largest in history revenue generated in the first 6 months of the year. Now just think about it. I mean, when we're talking about the biggest in history surplus for the first 6 months, considering where we were a couple years ago, it's really good. Really, really, really good. And so there's a lot of people that deserve credit along the way, and you know, I've had to be the leader of the band, and I think we've made the right moves, and we continue to make moves that are going to just continue to move us forward. The other things that are really, really interesting about this is the severance tax revenues versus December of last year came in at and I don't have these numbers right here in front of me, but came in at 73% higher than December of last year. Now, if that's not good enough for you, you know, corporate net income tax or corporate net tax came in at 101% higher than December of last year. You know, and I think that I'm going to not, this one I don't have any numbers here on, but I think our consumer sales tax was at, versus last year was at 12.5, is that right? 12.4% higher than December of last year. That's a tremendous indicator of how you're growing and what you're doing, you know. But the whole gist of everything that I could say to you today would be that our coal miners are back to work. You know, our exports are ringing the bell. I mean, you know, exports are up like 41.5%. You know, a lot of that is driven by our coal shipments, but it is a giant number, you know, and so you've got the largest budget or the largest surplus, you know, in state history for the first 6 months of the year. The largest revenue in state history for the first 6 months of the year. Now just think about just this just a second. We have a surplus of $185-point-something million at this time. But there's even more, and I've said it over and over, but the but there's even more is just this, is you remember back when, and a lot of people were doubting, and I put $58 million into the budget, of which I am entitled to do. And there was a lot of naysayers that stood around and said, it ain't gonna work, and we're not gonna put that in, so we're not gonna put any expenses towards against that. You know, so from the standpoint of dollars that are there, you can add the 58 million to the 185. That's all there is to it, because those dollars, you know, those dollars, the 185 is above my budget. You know, so net to where we are today, net, is you're really at 243 point something $9 million. Now, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and we ought to really, really be happy, because there's lots and lots and lots of good things that we're going to be able to do. One is make a real giant step towards fixing PEIA, and then there's all kinds of other things we can do, and you'll hear about them in the State of the State. But I think what we should do is maybe get Dave and his crowd up here, and if y'all could just pull your seats up here, and if you choose to ask any questions, I'm done reporting, because that's one thing I don't do really well. I'm not able to sit around and just talk forevermore about good news when, you know, and this is my personality, but this is just me. You know, once I digest this and I got it, it's time to go on to other business, because there's still plenty of people out there that are hurting, and it's time to move on and try to do something else. So unbelievable half the year, and we're here to answer any questions you want to ask. Yes, sir.
I promise I'm not trying to poo-poo on numbers. They're good numbers. But December itself tends to be yearly a good number. Good number as far as numbers that come in for revenue. Traditionally, is that correct? I've been told that's due to obviously businesses paying waiting to pay their taxes until December, and then they can write off certain stuff in 2019. So is that accurate? Or?
That's accurate. It's one of our, not one of our highest months, but it's a high month because it's a quarterly month, and the estimates of revenue reflect the expectation.
One thing I would want to add to that, we did a look back. Since April 1st, that's 9 months in a row, we have been above estimate. In most cases, substantially above. If you add up all the surplus above estimate since April 1st, it comes up to $234.4 million. So, yes, December was
plus the 58.
December was a really good month, but all the way back to April, we've had really good months. October was the one outlier. It was just a little above budget, June a little above, but the others have just been off the charts good.
How much of the growth do you attribute to the road bond and some construction that started?
Well, that certainly helped the sales tax side and the income tax side. We're looking at about $500 million per year in spend, and certainly $30 to $40 million a year of revenue can come from that spend. I think the highways program is moving along, but it's still got several years to go. The bigger factor in the current year is probably, in terms of construction, is the pipelines, where you've got a couple billion dollars of activity going on.
And would you say those projects are still on track to slow down at least next summer?
The projects are slated to be completed sometime in 2019 for the most part, absent litigation that might stretch a couple out beyond that, but for the most part, industry expects those to be completed sometime next year. Or actually, this year. 2019.
I know the math in the question I'm about to ask is not precise, because I realize there's a lot of factors, but let's just say if we have a deficit now of $185 million, surplus of $185 million, and $100 million goes to PEIA, and another $80+ million goes to the 5% pay raises for teachers and all state employees. does that effectively wipe out the surplus? And if so, where do we get the money for the cuts on income tax to senior citizens and Social Security? Where do we get the money for the free community and technical college and other programs that are being proposed?
Well, I think really and truly, you need to kind of wait till tomorrow night to hear all about that. You know, but, and you'll hear a whole lot more about that tomorrow night, but there's some fallacy in your numbers, but like I said, tomorrow night you'll hear a whole lot of stuff about that. I would tell you this, that we can do a great amount of what you're saying that may look like that it's difficult to do, but again, tomorrow night I'll outline every bit of that.
With the question, respect to the question about the pipeline revenue, let me read you some numbers here. These are halfway through the fiscal year, so it's not just about the pipelines. The severance tax, halfway through the fiscal year, is up 51.1% from prior year. Corporate net income tax, 42.2%. Consumer sales tax, 13.3%. Personal income tax, 9.1%. So to get a surplus of this magnitude, it's not just one revenue source. You have to have a very large increase in all the revenue sources, and it has to last for 6 months. In this case, all those are compared to 6 months in the last fiscal year. In other words, 1 year ago.
Do you guys have any projections on how long these surpluses are going to continue?
The rest of this fiscal year is relatively good. One year does not make another year, so next year will be a brand new year. We'll see for next year. But I think that the positive news, particularly in mining and pipelines, will probably continue to balance this fiscal year. We might see the numbers slow down a little bit from the current pace, which is really outstanding at 13.5% through 6 months. See that slowing down in the next 6 months, but still, compared to historical standards, this will be one of our better years and not our best year in a long time.
Traditionally, the budget problem waits until the end of the session. Historically, it has. Are you getting a little ahead of the curve by promising the teacher raises and the state employee raises as the first thing out of the box, not really knowing what our real revenue might be two months from now?
I'm not going to get over my skis at any point in time. You know, I believe wholeheartedly that when you hear all the stuff that we come up with and that we talk about tomorrow night, you'll see that absolutely we should do a 5% pay raise for all of our employees, and the PEI situation will be covered with no problem whatsoever. And I've got to say this to you, you know, and don't take this the wrong way, and I'm not saying it's just a mark, but it's your job to be skeptical, but this is so much an about face and a change that it's like Clark working on his lights in Christmas Vacation, and he worked and he worked and he worked, and he finally boom, and the lights come on, and his dad or his father-in-law said, "Clark, on the third row, that light's not twinkling." You know, well, you know, that light may not be twinkling. But for crying out loud, you know, from where we were to where we are, there's a whole lot of lights twinkling. And our coal miners are back to work. The steam coal market is at $75 a ton. You know, forecast for steam coal, Goldman Sachs just came out and said steam coal is here for at least the next 2 to 3 years. They're a lot better than I am. You know, metallurgical coal prices are near $200 a ton. That's a metric ton FOB port, but that works back to about $130 a ton FOB mine. Now, if you believe that the world is going to stay halfway stable, and you believe that West Virginia has coals that are so important to steel manufacturing in the world, as well as you believe that there's a possibility of Trump coming up with an infrastructure program that will have a significantly even bigger demand for steel, then really and truly you're going to have to say that West Virginia is a player. Now, you know, there are companies out in the wilderness like U.S. Steel that have reopened steel, you know, manufacturing processes all over the place, and those people are smart people. Now, they're smart people, and they're not going to open them for 3 days or 6 months or a year. They're planning on this to last. And so I can't promise what's out there, that there's not going to be a nuclear blast go off this afternoon in D.C. or a terrorist attack of some kind that will disrupt everything and put things back into a tailspin beyond belief. But I can tell you this, I can tell you that when I walked in the door, I said, coal's not dead. I truly believe that the underdeveloped countries, the third world countries, and the countries that were striving to become developed would have a driving need for their electric grid. And therefore, steam coal prices or thermal coal prices would rise. I believed absolutely that the world would get its act together and we would right ourselves together, and as we did, steel production would absolutely become important to us and a real player to West Virginia. That's why I believe that coal severance revenues would rise, and I said it back in the campaign. Now, you know, in all honesty, right behind that, what we've done, and I'm delighted to hear Mark's answer to you in regard to the roads. There's no question that the roads and the jobs with the roads are going to increase income tax or consumer sales tax and everything. But the great part about all this is we haven't even, with all this surplus stuff, we haven't even got to the real impact of the roads yet. So there's good days. There's good days.
Given what you just said, Governor, the big buzz in this building a year ago at this time was the China energy deal. Where does that stand? Is it going to happen? Where is it in the process?
I love the question, because here's what I believe with all in me. A natural gas hub in West Virginia is real. It's real. You know, the Chinese are still absolutely right at our doorsteps and very, very interested, as are the people from Qatar, as are other foreign investment coupled with U.S. investment. Now, the idea of a natural gas hub here and the security of it away from hurricanes and all the kind of issues, and closer to the marketplace, closer to the East Coast port, I mean, you know, instead of the Gulf, all those things are real. Now, and that's the next area that we've got to work. But Mark, the Chinese are vapor locked right now. And the reason they're vapor locked is because President Trump, and I'm going to mispronounce this, but President, is it Z or it's, I think it's, is that correct? It's G. Well, okay, never mind. I can't get it. But they are not at odds. They're truly friends, but they're working through all this, you know, tariff stuff and this, you know, trade imbalance and everything else. And in that situation, the Chinese can't pull the trigger till that's done. It's just absolutely understandable. You know, they're still standing right in the wings and communicating to us all the time, but they absolutely are not going to be able to pull the trigger until that's settled. And you know what? It'll be settled. The reason I know it'll be settled is because two players of the magnitude that what we are, we have to work together. You know, we should work together. And I will promise you, without any doubt in my mind, it'll be settled. We will not get in an all-out trade war with China. No way. No possible way. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of new spending on the table between the PEIA, the teacher raises. There are a lot of tax cuts on the table with business and inventory, Social Security, et cetera. Are you worried that right now the legislature might get carried away in a boom time, and then when the money's not coming in like it is now, all of a sudden there's huge changes to the base budget that could leave the state in a precarious position?
Well, let me tell you this, that precarious couldn't possibly be the word for what it was when I walked in the door. You know, I'm a real believer that you have to really watch, and I give you so many analogies, but you know, we're in the farming business, and we've farmed forever. You're running a combine, you're picking corn, and let's say you had a bad year on that particular field, and that field is not producing any more than 90 or 100 bushel the acre. In fact, it may even be producing 70. I'll promise you this, that if you're running a combine or you're having people that run a combine, when that crop is only 70 bushels, they're going to get every grain of corn. But all of a sudden, if you had a great year where it rained a lot and the crop was producing 200 bushel the acre, the operator of the combine could be just sitting there just driving along and the corn just boiling up in the grain tank, and they think he's just doing great, and he's throwing 20 or 30 bushel the acre out on the ground. So when you're going to make a mistake is when you have too much. And that's my job, to make sure that we don't make that mistake. We don't get out over our skis, and then when all of a sudden our crop is not the best, you know, then we don't have enough. It's my job to grow our economy, to come up with the big ideas, to make them come true, and then to absolutely leave this job at some point in time down the road, hopefully now 6 years down the road, but when I leave it sound and on absolute great ground. That's my job, and I'll do my job. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of talk in the legislature, especially in the Senate, about bringing in charter schools. Do you have any position?
I'm not for that.
Not for charter schools?
I'm not.
How about education savings accounts?
I'm sorry?
Education savings accounts?
I don't know. I need to know a lot more about that. I think our public school system is terrific. Don't get me wrong. You know, it's not something that that I am adamantly opposed to the fact that there are charter schools and you know and they do well and they educate kids and you know, it's not that I have some pet peeve against that. I would just tell you just this, that we're striving to continue to try to fix our public schools and our public education and pay our teachers what they ought to be paid and our service personnel and everything else. And until we get that on solid ground, I can't possibly see us taking on charter schools. The thing about charter schools, in my opinion, is just this, and we probably have rights to do these things, but my feeling is you know, and you know, I'll always tell you what I think, and not that I can't be wrong, but I just believe that today, as we strive to provide a better education for everyone, we don't really need to cherry pick the privileged, you know, until we get our public education system in a really good way.
Governor, Democrats are talking about the potential for a recreational marijuana bill. You'll remember the medical marijuana bill a few years ago. Do you have an opinion about the potential revenue or other aspects of recreational marijuana?
I am absolutely, adamantly opposed to recreational marijuana. I am absolutely on board with medical marijuana because I think that the medical community believes that there is true benefits to those that are sick and those that are hurting, and that may very well be something that could help those. But in all honesty, again, we have a serious issue within our state in regard to the drug situation and to trade off the ability to hide behind maybe the bush, maybe that's the right word. We're going to hide behind maybe the bush that it's going to bring in extra dollars. You need more money in this state. It's going to bring in extra dollars. You need to be for it and everything, when at the same time it could very well end up, compounding the drug problem that we already have.
At the same time, there are advocates for medical marijuana. We think you could really be throwing your weight around to get it off dead center, this roadblock that is the treasurer's office is working on, and the legislature wants to come up with a fix, but medical marijuana is not going to happen in the state July 1st unless something gets fixed.
Well,
What do you do to that end?
you will hear more about that tomorrow night too.
Getting way ahead of myself, aren't I?
You are just ahead of you're bright, you know, and I give you all kinds of kudos for intelligence, but because you're touching on a lot of the things that I'm gonna touch on tomorrow night. Okay, we done? Bless y'all. Thank you. Thank y'all, ladies and gentlemen.